Here. Director Goodstuff. Here. Director Bedard. Director Proctor.
Here.
Director Berker.
Here.
Director Valdez.
Here.
Director Garcia.
Here.
Would everybody please stand for the pledge of allegiance? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we're going to move on to public comments. Do we have any public comments here tonight? No? Perfect. We'll move on to item 4, action items, discussion and possible action regarding legislative process and efforts related to Ivhd extension for today only recommended regarding funding mechanism.
I'll start this one off, Madam Chair. As the board recalls, we sent a request to the legislature asking them to extend the deadline to recommend a funding mechanism for Ivhd. We've got some information on that front that has been included in the agenda packet, which is a Ivhd budget compilation. It's a one-page document prepared by ECRMC, and it shows ECRMC, PMH, Pioneers, and Heffernan's public budgets. It's got information taken from the public budgets showing operating revenues, operating expenses, and excess of revenues over expenses. And in a nutshell, what you find, I'm not a CFO, but in a nutshell, what you'll see is he's put together the 3 agencies into one so that if Ivhd were to take over PMH, ECRMC, and Heffernan today, all things being equal, all revenues being the same, all expenses being the same, we would have an excess revenue over expenses of around $1.3 million a year. So that's showing a net profit or excess of revenues over expenses, whatever you want to call it, of 1.3 million, which is, sort of additional consideration for this board with respect to the funding mechanism. Because if we're operating at a net excess of $1 million or 1.3 a year, maybe this board can, which it's contemplated already, take its time in recommending a funding mechanism, a countywide potential tax, because maybe we don't need one, or maybe if we needed one, it's smaller than we expect. This is more support for the be very thoughtful and intentional about and use current data approach, which this board adopted in the resolution that it passed in the August board meeting. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because that was a helpful document that we received. And then we've also had conversations with folks in the legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate, relating to our extension request. And the purpose of the action item today is to discuss and possibly take action for this board on two separate points. One is, so our request for an extension was packaged by the legislature into a Senate bill, the trailer bill for this cycle, called SB 1070. So SB 1070 makes some very, very minor changes, but it's the change we've requested to allow this board to recommend a funding mechanism. Instead of November 2024 election, it would be November 2026 election. The only other thing is it also removes the language, the current language says, shall be presented to and approved by voters via ballot measure for the March or November 2024 election. Now it says just to be presented to the voters. And they took out and approved by, because of course the statute can't compel the public to approve anything. So that's just kind of a, I would call it a cleanup. But the only really substantive change is changing it from 2024 to 2026. and it's on or before. So this board could take action to do it much sooner. That's just changing kind of the tail end. The folks in Assemblymember Senator Padilla's office have sent us 2 draft letters of support for 1070. I am happy to, I just received these 2 hours ago, so that's why they're not included in the agenda packet, but copies of these draft letters are public and will be made available to anyone who wants one. I can throw it up on the screen here so that folks can have a look and the folks on Zoom can have a look also. But this is the sample letter of support. It says, "Dear Chair Carrillo, I'm writing on behalf of the Imperial Valley Healthcare District to express our strong support for Senate Bill 1070, introduced by Senator Padilla. This bill is critical for extending the deadline for Ivhd to recommend and present a permanent funding source mechanism to voters on or before the November 2026 election. Since our establishment under AB 918, Ivhd has made significant progress in fulfilling our mandates. 1, division into voting districts. The district has successfully been divided into 7 voting districts. 2, ECRMC acquisition terms. We have approved a letter of intent for the acquisition of El Centro Regional Medical Center and have since entered into negotiations with them. 3, dissolution of Pioneers Memorial Healthcare District. We have recommended a dissolution date for PMHD. 4, dissolution of Heffernan Memorial Healthcare District. HMHD was successfully dissolved as of July 25, 2024. However, despite these accomplishments, we have encountered significant challenges in identifying a permanent funding source mechanism due to delays in obtaining crucial financial data from PMHD. Despite our efforts, PMHD has not provided the necessary participation in the Kaufman Hall financial feasibility study and has delayed the provision of essential data. These challenges have made it impossible for us to responsibly recommend a funding mechanism by the original August 9, 2024, I would say voter presentation deadline. SB 1070's proposed extension to the November 2026 election is essential to allow us the time needed to gather and analyze the data required, ensuring a well-informed recommendation that will secure the financial stability of healthcare services in Imperial Valley. We respectfully urge your support for SB 1070 as it progresses through the Assembly Local Government Committee. This extension is critical to meeting the healthcare needs of our community in a sustainable and fiscally responsible manner. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. Sincerely, Imperial Valley Healthcare District." There's also another draft letter of support that we can send out to the community or any other interested stakeholders that they can very easily crib from, sign, and submit to the legislature through their portal. The only way to submit letters of support is through this official portal. So part 1 of the conversation on agenda item 4A is whether this board wants to send a letter of support, like the sample letter drafted for us. And then step 2 is whether the board would like to send representatives to Sacramento this week to lobby support for the bill as it is considered this week. Because this is, I think it's going to be over the next couple days when this is presented to the legislature and considered and voted on. There's also been, to my knowledge, 2 letters in opposition to SB 1070. So this is not necessarily a slam dunk. And I believe it's in the interest of this organization to make sure that SB 1070 passes. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or turn it over to you for a discussion.
So while we have this, I want to kind of just reiterate how we got here. So if you go back to one of our very first meetings when the BAE study was presented, and the Kaufman Hall study as well, one of the few things our boards, I would say ECRMC, PMH, and our board all agreed on was that the study that was presented for the PMH expansion, the BAE study, was flawed and the data wasn't current or accurate. And so of that, we kind of took the route to update the Kaufman Hall study to get current data before we put it to a tax measure. And so then, we pretty much got told no every single which way. And so for me, it's really hard to propose somebody to pay a tax when you're like, is this data correct? And it's, I don't know. I would say it's very unfortunate. I would say most definitely the people getting impacted the most would be the Heffernan folks, because another board that they don't elect or even have a say in made all these decisions that impacted them. So I'm very empathetic for them on that. And then just because this says 2026 doesn't mean that we can't do it sooner. And so we actually asked the legislator to put it into 25, and they said, hey, let's put it 26. That's when there's a normal ballot. If something happens, you guys don't kind of bind yourself, into this box where you have to come back to the legislator again. And they're very firm of, this is it, So with that,
Can I make a comment?
yeah, absolutely.
Maritza Hurtado, Calexico. You're right, Heffernan is the one that's been impacted the most. I just came back from an event. We were coming home and I saw that the Calexico Wellness Center had their van parked outside, and I saw people out there and I didn't know what it was, and so of course I need to know. And so they were actually doing a backpack giveaway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was very positive, but this is the question, when we talk about the balance and the equality of everything that happened, as you all know, our concern is Calexico has no hospital. So if we have to wait until 2025 for all of this to be resolved, I guess the weird question is, what are we right now as far as Heffernan has been closed? Because like yesterday we were talking about Mr. Solano having seen that the Calexico Hospital closed in 1989, and he was there with Dr. Katsagenis when it closed, and so interesting that now we're fighting for our community's health situation, and that we're now seeing that Heffernan is actually at its end. But then it ended, and then what? How do we now reach out and serve the community? Because I see that this happened today, and that was beautiful, but it wasn't well attended. How did we promote that if he was the one that was being paid? I forget his name. We had a full-time PR person. Is that person still being paid? Because I know that it's within a little bit of a confusion time right now of switching over to what you had as services being provided by the Heffernan group and the Heffernan staff, people that were in that regard, such as PR. But right now then, if you look at this, how is Calexico Heffernan what we were usually used to, because we don't have a hospital. The hospitals, everybody got help. Everybody got a lot of money. Everybody got loans. What happened to Calexico? We got a really bad deal. And so, how do we make up for that? Because the needs are still there. These kids were so happy to see their backpacks today. And to know that we're in such a situation where we don't even know how we're going to exist. We had 2 meetings a month before for Heffernan. So there's nothing anymore. So who speaks for that? Who's going to fulfill and fill in that void for that conversation to still continue, even though there wasn't, in our opinion, much being done? But we do need that still as a...
No, that's
as a concern, that you all see that we don't have a hospital. We're still in the same situation. We haven't changed as a community. What happened is that the funding that was helping somewhat in certain areas in our community is gone. And we had no say in that. But we still don't have anything that's worthwhile for the replacement. We also asked about those reimbursements. We don't understand what's going to happen to us with all of this savings that we saved for such a long time. And that right now at this point, we have no information who's going to fill in that need. So let's not forget, Calexico doesn't have a hospital. And we're the same exact city, and we've been basically robbed of at least somewhat of a safety net. And so how will we reach out to the citizens after Heffernan is gone to continue to notify them what it is that's going on in those efforts? That was the intention, the original intention of having had Heffernan monies be a tax. So thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to provide one clarification. So the event that was it was actually at Heffernan's building today. That was the state senator Padilla put on that event, and we provided the building, and then we asked Calexico Wellness to attend as well. So with that, dive into board comments or a motion.
We're looking for a motion to what? Support
So
this?
my recommendation, if you want one, you can tweak it however you'd like, but my recommendation would be, so there's kind of two things, but we could put it in the same motion, and we should talk about the sending board representatives to Sacramento to lobby for the passage of SB 1070. You could talk about that separately if you'd like, but as a part of the action relating to our extension request, my recommendation would be a motion to send the letter of support, as I just read, as drafted by Senator Padilla's office, to the legislature on behalf of the board. So that's one motion, is a motion to send the letter of support to the legislature on behalf of the board. And then the second item for discussion, which you can roll into the same motion if you want, but you can do it separately if you want, it would be, send the letter of support to the legislature and send folks to Sacramento to lobby on behalf of Ivhd for the passage of SB 1070. Both kind of things are related to this board's potential support of SB 1070. So it's really just like, how do you want to support it? With a letter of support, and sending folks to Sacramento, none of the above, one or the other, both. That's.
I'd like to make a motion that we do send the letter of support to Senator Padilla's office, and then on to the legislature, and then in addition to that, to send board members to the Capitol in support of SB 1070.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
I abstain.
Oh, abstain, sorry.
Just for clarification on the motion, we can't send a majority of this board. We'll have Brown Act issues. So is it okay to say 3 members or less of the board to Sacramento to lobby on behalf of SB 1070? Is that okay, Director Proctor, with your motion?
Yes, yes. I would like to amend my motion to include that it would be 3 members or less.
Perfect. And is that okay with you, Director Valdez, with respect to your second?
I second.
Or Director Garcia, sorry, with respect to your second?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then does everyone vote still aye except for Director Berker?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and you're still abstaining, Director Berker? Okay, so then we have 1, 2, 5, 0, with 1 abstention. Okay.
Now we'll move on to item B, discussion of possible action to approve business expense reimbursement policy.
Sorry, on item 4A, there should be a discussion at the board level now about who to send. Because that's a separate issue, but who's gonna decide who goes? What if all 5 of you that said yes wanna go? There's only 3 or less, so I recommend you figure that out today so that you can have clarity and the public will know who is being sent on Ivhd's behalf.
I would volunteer to go.
I can go.
I would volunteer as well.
Great, do we have, would anyone like to make a motion that the board send Director Proctor, Director Garcia, and Director Burnworth to Sacramento to lobby in support of SB 1070?
I make a motion.
I'll make the motion. I'll second it.
Okay, Director Goodsell,
I had a motion by Goodsell and a second by Berger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
thank you for the clarity. Okay, so item 4B is the discussion and possible action to approve the business expense reimbursement policy. The business expense reimbursement policy is included in the agenda packet along with a attachment, which is the IRS publication 463, that just says the federal rates for expenses on travel, car rentals, etc., mileage rates. This policy is pretty typical of public agencies and healthcare districts. We could go through it, but it essentially provides for the reimbursement of actual expenses relating to official travel of the agency. It's pretty standard, for example, anytime you no first class travel, for example. Use government rates when you can, when they're available. There would be, you have to submit your expense report form showing the actual expenses together with the receipts. Those have to be submitted within 60 days following the completion of travel. When you return, if you're traveling to, for example, a seminar or a conference, an educational seminar, conference, or other external meeting on behalf of the board, you have to request it at a duly noticed public meeting of the board of directors. So we just did that for the travel to Sacramento. You have to give the name and the purpose and the location of the meeting and the reasonable estimated cost of attendance. We don't have the reasonable estimated cost right now, but of the Sacramento travel, but the board can anticipate airfare, lodging, and Ubers or whatever you want to, whatever means of transportation. There's limits on meals. There's, prohibitions against, for example, alcohol. And all of the sort of direct billing and travel advance language is in the policy. So I'm happy to answer any questions. The board's had an opportunity to look at the expense reimbursement policy. Oh, the other thing I want to draw your attention to is that when you, after you come back from a seminar, conference, or other meeting, you have to give a report to the Ivhd board so that the entire board could benefit from whatever the traveling director attended. So for example, if you go to an ACHD conference and you attend a bunch of seminars relating to healthcare, you should come back and you can give a verbal or written report to the rest of the board about what you learned or who you chatted with. And there's 1/1 approval, which means that a director cannot approve their own expense. So it provides that if the Ivhd board chairperson is the person requesting reimbursement, the vice chair or another officer of the board of directors has to approve it after the expense report is submitted. All other non-chair people, members of the board, have to get approval from the Ivhd board chair or his or her delegee. Reimbursements will be processed and paid no later than 2 weeks from the date of submission. And again, the reimbursement rates are going to be set forth by the IRS publication. So there's nothing crazy going on. Economy, coach airfare, there's provisions about lodging, all of the applicable. Oh, and there's a attestation. So the draft Ivhd expense report form is attached to the back. I went ahead and created it. So you fill it out, and then there's an attestation at the bottom saying you certify that the expenses comply with the expense reimbursement policy. So this has to be a written business expense and reimbursement policy has to be approved by this board before this agency can authorize any reimbursements to board members. It's a requirement of AB 1234. So I recommend approval.
Question on that issue, because I kind of when it comes to policies and procedures, I don't think about the current people or people I'm thinking of. I'm thinking about the policy moving forward. So I do have a question on number 2 on page 2, the travel advance. And we have in special circumstances, the board chairperson or his or her designee in her or his sole discretion may approve travel advances for transportation, hotel rooms, et cetera, as an alternative to the direct billing or reimbursement procedure set forth above. So I guess that the detail person in me wants to know, define special circumstances, or it shouldn't be the sole discretion of the board chairperson.
Let me explain that language because that comes up often. So special circumstances are typically if the board member, the traveling board member, wants to attend some conference somewhere, but can't afford or doesn't have credit, doesn't have the credit card available to purchase the ticket, or doesn't have the funds to purchase the ticket and then get reimbursed, or it's too much of an impact on their personal finances to book a hotel, book travel to wherever they're going to book to, advance, pay for meals, pay for the hotel, pay for the Ubers, and then come back. Some folks find hardship in advancing those expenses for the agency and then getting reimbursed 2 weeks later or 2 weeks after submission of the expense report. And that is the type of special circumstance that's contemplated in the advance. That is also why it's within the chair's sort of sole discretion, because the policy, the kind of public policy perspective is if that board member were forced to come to the board at a public meeting and then present their circumstances to the entire board for approval of a travel advance, it can be humiliating or difficult for that person. And so having it just be one person, the board chair, and then in his or her discretion, they can say, okay, we think reasonably this travel is gonna cost about $3,000. We're gonna advance you $3,000. When you come back, you give us all receipts, we true it up, and maybe you still, we still owe you another $30, or maybe it was $2,800, so you owe us $200 back, and you true it up after you have all the expenses submitted. That's the thought behind the travel advances, and those are the special circumstances contemplated. That's really the only contemplated in the travel advance scenario. It's usually when a director finds it's like too difficult to front all the money themselves, or they have a credit issue. Because remember, most boards are elected officials, and so
it still has to be pre-approved by the whole board to go. The only thing we're talking about is how the board gets reimbursed.
correct. The only thing you'd be talking about is the advance. So, Director Jane Doe comes to the board and says, I'd like to go to Sacramento to lobby SB 1070. I think it's going to cost maybe $2,000. And then the board says, sure, go ahead, and takes action to send you. And then afterwards, you go directly to the board chair and say, can I have an advance instead of getting reimbursed? And then that's a conversation that person has with the board chair. And if the board chair approves it, then it can be advances, but the advance would never exceed $5,000.
Okay, because we also have provisions in here for the possibility of corporate cards and direct
Yes.
billing, so.
Right, and so, if and once we get that set up, that's a very convenient and recommended way to get it done, which is you would have your administrative staff set up the travel, book the rooms, so that there's no reimbursements. In a perfect world, there's no reimbursements. It's already set up for you. Or the only reimbursements are like meal or tips for, whoever, or, whatever it is. Basically just meal and like Ubers or car rentals these days. But we don't have that set up right now. And then it's really gonna be a matter of whether this board wants to set up a corporate credit card for the agency or not. Some agencies are fans of that, others are absolutely not. So the language is just in there to provide flexibility for the board.
And then just like for the meals and gratuities, your reimbursement can't be more than the federal government per diem rates, yes?
Correct. Yeah. The only thing that's like even a little bit squishy is, which I've seen folks get pushed back on, but not really, is the other business-related expenses, which is a $25 per day maximum reimbursement for the health or wellness facilities. And that's just if, usually you see that where if there's a board director who's very into fitness and the hotel they're staying at does not have a gym, and they'd like to use a gym across the street or down the street, and it's $20 for a day pass, and then they get the day pass, and that's like something that is considered a health and wellness while traveling cost. We can strike that, or not. If that has a max of $25 per day, and it's not, it's not like an automatic per diem. It's not like you just get that no matter what. It's just recognition of the fact that if you're on official agency business, your mental and physical personal health shouldn't be significantly disrupted if you're in Sacramento or in wherever you are doing business on behalf of the agency.
And they're still showing receipts for that.
Sure. Absolutely. Everything needs a receipt except for, I think there's like a $10 cap the receipts the gratuities are capped at the IRS rate. And that's really just like if your only option is, if you rent a car and your only option is to valet, you want to valet $5 or whatever it is. Everything else, especially these days, all other gratuities are usually, you can print them out. There's gratuities on everything, right? So people are gonna pass a law about that.
It has to have a detailed bill that says what it is, yes?
Yes, yes, everything needs a detailed bill, showing all expenses, and that would be attached to the expense reimbursement form.
I've got something to say about this. I know that prior to us convening as a board, there's a lot of discussion in the community about expenses that were incurred by, like, for example, El Central Regional. The talk of the town was this trip to Dubai for business purposes and all this. I don't want to go to Dubai. But there was a lot of talk about why did people have to go to Dubai? Was it for recruitment? A lot of different things. And I think that in order to have this kind of policy, the best thing we can do as a board moving forward is to have also, in the spirit of transparency, is having some kind of public, way of looking at what our expenses are. And I'm thinking if we can do something where it's quarterly, where people can log in and see where all of our expenses are. You know, case in point, happening right now, they're giving us all this money that we're using. And I would feel a lot more comfortable if I lived in Mexico that, hey, at least we know where these expenses are being utilized and things like that. I think that as a matter of policy, it'd be great if we could maybe implement something that on a quarterly basis, something goes up and it's there for the historical value, et cetera, on our expenses. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
So the first thing that came to mind is like Ivhds, when they submit their directors submit their reimbursement requests, they have to have everything in there, and it talks about like what they all spent on. So the reimbursement request would have to come back to the board, yes?
No,
No?
it,
Can we,
unless it exceeds the amount, it's, as long as it satisfies the policy, like as long as it's in compliance with the policy, then the reimbursement will happen within 2 weeks. Because you don't want to wait for a board meeting if you want to get reimbursed. So,
Because technically, we're supposed to have an estimated reasonable cost of attendance.
on the front end,
approving
correct, yeah.
On the front end, so that way, you know, as long as administrative or whoever looks at it and says it's in line with what we approved, then it should be okay.
You're saying that essentially all I was looking for was like having a posting on a quarterly basis of what the expenses are for business for us. That was all.
Well, we should have our financials
Yeah, we'll have our financials on the website.
posted.
And what you can do is, you have financial reports. If you want to like subsection, quarterly breakout of reimbursements, you can ask your admin to prepare that for you. If there's zero, there's zero. If there's a handful or more, you can each quarter see what reimbursements went out, like a check registry.
But I do agree, we need to be very transparent.
So if the board is inclined to approve the policy as drafted, my recommendation would be a motion to approve the business expense and reimbursement policy. However, you would have to, at this board meeting, waive 2A and B, which is provision Roman numeral 4A, 2A and B, because we didn't post on the agenda the name, purpose, and location of meeting and the estimated reasonable cost of attendance. This is not required by law. This is just what you as a board would be required to do in order to qualify for a business expense reimbursement moving forward. But since the business expense travel that needs to happen this week needs to happen like tomorrow and Wednesday, we didn't have time to put it on this agenda, and it's not included in this agenda packet. So it's not a violation of anything, it's just, it would arguably, we would pass the policy and then immediately violate it by not, because we're approving the expenses or the travel. So that would just be like a little asterisk on the motion. But moving forward, all business expense and reimbursement requests would have to be presented up front in compliance with the policy.
Okay, so I guess I would move that we go ahead and approve the business and expense reimbursement policy as presented and explained, with the caveat that it will not apply to the travel that has already been previously approved.
Well, so it does have to apply to the travel because AB at 1, 2, 3, 4, you need to have a written policy to get reimbursed. So it will apply to the travel, just
We're gonna
for
waive
A
for
to A and B. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
that would
we'll
apply.
waive that. However you said that, I make that motion.
Okay.
I second it.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Berger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Now we'll move on to item C, discussion of possible action to authorize contract for public relations consultant.
So I'll kick this off and then turn it over to Mr. Salazar, who we have on Zoom. Included in the agenda packet is the Ivhd template independent contractor agreement. We would need to fill in the blanks with respect to, name of the contractor's corporation or company or business name, amount, and then scope of work. And so the scope of work is going to be presented by Mr. Salazar in his proposal, which he will give in a second. And the proposal is for 3 months at $4,000. Yeah, at $4,000 a month. And I am happy to shoot up onto the screen the proposal. Hold on 1 second. Copies are available for members of the public, and they're available in the board book, which is at the front. And then Mr. Salazar, if you just want to tell me when to go next slide, I'll skip ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming in the audience today. And definitely, I had the opportunity in meeting with the ad hoc committee twice in the last month. And as mentioned, this is a 3-month commitment that I'm looking at in building the building blocks for the foundation of what Ivhd will be as it continues moving on. And at the end, what I propose in the next slide is I'm proposing. Can you hear me?
Yep, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Building a multi-channel public affairs strategy. And the word that I'd like to use tonight is engagement. How can we engage the Valley into knowing more about Ivhd? What do we need to do to establish a strong presence within the communities? I believe Ms. Hurtado mentioned El Lexico, and definitely that is something that we all need to be mindful of, because Heffernan was there for many decades, and what happened to their healthcare? And it's our duty as part of the multi-channel strategy that I mentioned here in the little siphon circle. It's about what our goals are, what our audiences, what's our message going to be, in both bilingual. There's the institutional outreach of newsletters and town halls, but we need to also work with the other type of messaging efforts that there are. Whether it's now everybody's going digital, you got social media. I see that you have a website that we would need to work with, but there's many opportunities in getting our message across. So basically, that's a little bit what I want to propose, in that I would be assisting, being a resource, and working with your staff of Ivhd. I have over 2 decades of public affairs. I've done. I was worked with the local healthcare district. 4 years ago, I I was the Director of Communications and External Affairs for the local healthcare district in Raleigh. I continue working with healthcare organizations, and I want to be of service and see and start building the building blocks in order to have, the strong presence that's needed to inform the public in both languages, to work on different strategies with your staff in order to get the message out there. And if given the opportunity, we can go to the next slide if possible. Implementing a roadmap. This is just an example of a roadmap of maybe 6 months. Of course, I'm working with 3 months, and that's basically what I'd like to continue working on for the time being, but a roadmap of messaging of what we want to discuss, the creation, the content, the branding in English, in Espanol. Of course, this is just kind of like a little bit of a roadmap that you all have, but this is a little bit of sampling that we are working on, that we would like to continue working with, but there's a lot to do here, and of course, we have to continue, I understand the legislation that the senator has put forth, so in the end, it's keeping people apprised of what we are doing. So with that said, this is a little bit of what it is establishing stronger presence, a brand, of course, engaging with the community, but more importantly, promoting the district's services and initiatives that we have coming forward. So that could be a little bit more at the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Do you have any questions from the board?
I do have one question. Did we actually request any other inquiries about this PR document?
These are just samples of different ways, of
Sorry.
technical ways of reaching out to folks, but thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
I just want to get to the meat and potatoes of what we're getting at.
I just wanted to ask if we had gotten any other applicants for this position, or if it was just something that we chose, or for Frank Salazar, or?
It's something that the ad hoc committee had to lead on.
I was at the ad hoc, but I didn't have that discussion. I was just wondering.
Frank is the only one who spoke.
Oh, Frank is the only one who spoke. Okay, so there's not like any public notice out there that we're looking for a PR person?
No, currently we don't have the RFP policy, so,
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
yeah.
All right.
And I think part of the issue is timeliness. We need to start getting our message
Yesterday?
out there. Yeah.
Yesterday? A month ago? 2 weeks ago?
And some of the things that we talked to Frank about, to that point, is we plan on moving forward, if we approve this agreement here with Frank, is having a press release after every board meeting to where we can present the public with the facts of our meeting and what occurred in that meeting. That's one media thing that will occur every month. Also, after every milestone, we'll also have another press release or something in the papers explaining what the milestone was, what the accomplishment was as well. And then also, Tony has already added a button to our subscribe to our newsletter button to our website. So as soon as moving forward, we're going to develop a newsletter, and we're going to encourage everybody to subscribe to our newsletter. So we've had people approach us, at the podium here and say that they don't know much about what we're doing, where can they learn more, what have you. One of the avenues they'll be able to turn to would be the newsletter. Make sure that you're subscribed to the newsletter so you're getting the latest up-to-date information. And then also, we're going to add to the webpage as well, and this is a great idea from Ms. Danila Berker, to have some fact sheets there as well. And so if people want to know details about the actual bill, information, it'll be there. The roadmap, it'll be there. What's been accomplished, what lays ahead. And then another big thing that we definitely need to focus on, help the public focus on, is the why we're doing this. What is the goal we're all striving for? And our need to have the community help us get to that goal and explain to them why it's going to be better for everybody. And so I think Mr. Salazar is going to really help us with that messaging and getting that point across as well.
Madam Chair, we have a request for comment on Zoom.
Whoever has their hand raised on Zoom, if you could introduce yourself, please. And make it.
My name is Barbara Fraser, and I'm just wondering if we couldn't find someone local, since we are in a local community here, that we should have someone here. I'm sure in the public, we must have other folks that might do this kind of work.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Rubin. Do we have any other public comments? Or any discussion from the board?
I just want to add to what Board Member Berker mentioned. Are we as a board mandated to have an RFP for this position, or we don't have to?
No, you're not mandated to have an RFP for a public affairs consultant.
Okay.
You are mandated to have a public bidding process for stuff like construction of capital projects. And one of the items, you know, on our list of things to do is to bring back a procurement policy that will establish the procedures for professional services, equipment purchases, construction projects, etc. And that'll be a long, comprehensive policy that this board can evaluate, and those are the procedures staff will have to follow before bringing a contract to the board for approval. We just don't have that yet.
Thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
So with that, do I have a motion? Or any other discussion?
I make a motion to approve the agreement with Mr. Frank Salazar's company, Ivhd, and Public Affairs and Strategy, and look forward to working with them if approved.
I have a motion by Garcia and a second by Berker. All in favor, say aye.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm so sorry. Just because we didn't have it in the agenda packet, and so I asked Director Garcia to amend his motion to approve a contract for public relations consultant services in the amount of $4,000 a month for 3 months. And then would this board like to bring, you know, at some point in a future board meeting, we should talk about what happens at the end of the 3 months. Renewal, RFP, you know, you are always allowed to, okay, we want another 3 months, etc. But for now, because the contract included in the agenda packet was a template, it doesn't say the amount and it doesn't say the time period. So let's add that to the motion.
Okay. So I'd like to, do I need to make an amendment?
Yes, please, sorry.
I'd like to amend my motion to authorize the contract of a public relations consultant, and that public consultant to be Ivhd, Public Affairs and Strategy, and the agreement to be for $4,000 per month for 3 months. And that's my motion.
And I second again.
So I have a motion by Garcia and a second by Berker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain, as I wasn't in on the whole conversation. I did have an opportunity to look at it, and I am in support of it, but I will abstain because I wasn't here for the whole conversation.
Thank you. And with that, motion carries with 1 abstention. And I would like to,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. So sorry to interrupt. I have just a quick recommendation that maybe we take the informational items before the closed session. Just for the benefit of the public, that maybe we can just do those informational updates so that we can do the closed session and then just adjourn after the closed session and not come back and reopen and have folks sitting on Zoom.
perfect. So with that, we'll move to item 6, and that's General Counsel's update.
Thank you. So we have been in conversation with ECRMC and VMG, the appraisal company. VMG anticipates having their appraisal complete by around the 2nd week of September. So once we get that appraisal, that will be pretty critical in helping move along the negotiations with ECRMC. We also had a Zoom this morning with BRG, the financial strategist that we approved, that this board approved at last regular board meeting. And we met with Peter Chadwick and Haywood Miller and James McKenna. and the ad hoc negotiation committee did, and had a productive discussion with them about a strategy for a work plan and budgets, and how VRG can move ahead in assisting this board in its negotiations with DCRMC. So that happened, and it's moving forward. We also, and then my question to this board for the next, September regular board meeting is, do you want me to bring back any other policies so we can slowly add to the list of policies that we have? Would you like me to bring back a draft procurement policy? And then the other policy that I keep reminding you about is the board member compensation policy for modest amounts that the board would get for attendance at board meetings. Is it, yes, no, maybe, bring it back, let's worry about next board meeting, it's up to you.
Personally, we're trying to keep legal expenses to a minimum.
No problem.
So, sorry, but I'm not sorry.
No problem. Okay.
Do you have any other comments?
No, but I do agree with that comment.
Perfect. Then we'll move on to item B, Administrative Coordinator's update.
I wanted to give a quick update on the urgent care issues, just so you know. So the urgent care is blocked off in two sections, the north section and the south section. The north section, if you ever want to come and look at it before we go live, we can do a walking tour whenever you're up to it. Early in the mornings are nicer than lunchtime, but we'll comply at any time. So on the north end, we're just waiting for a set of doors for the X-ray suite. Once those doors come in, we already talked to the city, and they're going to be able to give us an occupancy permit once the doors are installed. They're special doors for the X-ray room. They have been shipped. They were shipped 2 weeks ago. We're still waiting on arrival for those to be installed. That will give us occupancy for the north end building. The south end building is still waiting for a set of doors also, that we're waiting for a lead load, so they will find out what kind of doors and how much lead they need on those doors. Those were ordered about 3-4 weeks ago, and those orders had a 4-month lag to get here. So we're looking at about 3 months before those doors get here. When the jams get in, they'll be able to finish everything else, and we'll just be waiting for those doors. So we're looking at about 3.5 months for the south side to get be compliant and ready for the occupancy permit. You will be. I've had several conversations with Dr. Tyson about the urgent care, and at some point he's probably going to. Yeah, he wanted to be on this agenda, but it was too late to be added to the agenda. So there's an opportunity for him to come with the next one if he so chooses, and if you want to put him on the agenda. And there's also discussion with him as far as do we want to keep the same agreement or not with them? Do we want to maybe he was open to adding a CT scanner partner for the CT scanner. Also available to discuss pharmacy partnerships with a local entity. All those opportunities will come up, and once he brings them up, I'll share further with you. But right now, it was just tentative talking about the agreement because there's some changes that he wants to do to the building. But I said, you know what, whatever conversation you have with Heffernan, you have to bring it to this board because if you don't have anything signed, you have to come to the board and explain it. So that's why.
Question about that, Tomas. Did he have input in the construction of the building?
A little bit. As far as the initial CT scanner, he had a different team managing it, the construction and a construction company liaison that would come over initially. So they give us specs for that, and somewhere along the line, those specs changed because that team went away. So there was a lot of knowledge lost from the people that were there before. So when he comes in, there's obviously some changes that he wasn't aware of, I'm sure. And so that did cause some delay as far as getting the lead loads. Otherwise, that would have been done some time ago. So right now, those are the only things pending for the building. And he also wanted us to, during a walkthrough a few months ago, he wanted us to put a generator in the back of the building for a backup generator for power issues. Install oxygen lines, which come with a lot of other expenses attached to them, like storage. And so it's a big deal, especially for oxygen. And so when he brought that to Heffernan before, Heffernan passed on it because he wanted a new bill. And he kind of wants that now, so those will be all new things. We're just landlords of that building, right? And as Ivhd, you own the building, and that's what that you're subject to. So if there's anything else that wants to be done in addition to, it has to come to us. So we do walkthroughs quite often, and the last one, they just finished the landscaping. They were putting the handicap signs up today, the posts and other stuff today that they were finishing up. Landscape's done. Sorry to say that about 7 of the plants have died. One of the trees, it's been hot, and but everything else is beginning to look like an urgent care. The signs are up, so we're just waiting on those doors to be able to put the north side and get the occupancy permit. But things have been changing a little bit.
So when the specs changed, how much did that cost us?
It wasn't so much the cost because it was going to be plug and play, and as far as the lines for it were the same, but what it cost was the delay, which the delay is time of construction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it had a CT scanner. We had a grant for $450,000 for startup costs, which some of those funds were going to be used for the down payment of CT scanner. Somewhere along the line, that when that first team went away, that information, I guess, didn't pass through, or it didn't make it. There was an issue with the translation of that information, which for Heffernan it wasn't an issue, but it was on the other side. So what happened, that delay cost time, and that's why those doors are not here yet, because they had to wait for a test for a nuclear physicist to find out how much lead you need on those doors to prevent radiation from escaping.
Right.
So silly delays, but they do cost time because it delayed the whole process. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and still waiting for those double doors, which will be another 2 months before we have it open.
And you hold all the licensings and permits and everything, you have copies of all those? Or is it Tyson?
No, so as landlords, we have certain things like, we did apply for a right-of-way passage, and that's something that we had to apply because it's our building. But anything that has to do with operational, that would be on him, because Ivhd is the landlord, right? So any permits that reside with the landlord, we would apply for, and we would have copies of that. Anything that he wants to do above and beyond, he has to get your permission to do.
And those are improvements to the building that will stay with the building?
Yes, yes. So, yeah, his latest petition was for a backup generator and oxygen lines, because he wants to do additional services. Those were never contemplated before. So it was just, what can we do to say, Ivhd was to say, hey, it's a hypothetical, Dr. Tyson doesn't want to do this. What do we do with it, right? So I'm sure it would be really easy to get a hospital partner for the urgent care. And do you want to step it up, right? Creating a hospital, guys, a third hospital in this county is beyond financial means of the entire county.
Absolutely.
Right? From the beginning, we knew there was enough funds for one healthcare district or one entity, but we're always playing still debating with each other. We do one service, we copy it, and then we want to take it away. And that profit goes back and forth, and that has to do with the peaks and valleys that you saw on financial performance, right? So we know that in Calexico is always an issue, and that's where they lost the hospital. Finances are not there, not even for two systems to fight each other. That's where the sole provider works out so well. So it's important for us to know that, and I know that the public has a hard time believing that, but it's the reality of it, that if you look at everybody that's out here, the type of payers that we have, we call them underfunded, because unfunded sounds bad, but it's underfunded. So there is a big shortcoming of available funds for us to survive. An urgent care, when you're hospital-based, has different regulations than when you're doctor-owned office. And you know I could not do this because she does the billing for that. So it's very different whether you own a building for a hospital or it's a doctor's office. But imagine this, there's a pharmacy in this urgent care, right? So if we were to partner with a hospital, we could have 340B program help service that pharmacy. That would be huge, because we get special discounts on those medications, and it's profitable. Now, what kind of patients are going to go to those pharmacies? And this is one of the realities of it, that it's going to be underfunded patients, right? So there's programs that the government has so that we could subsidize that. Another thing would be a partnership with a hospital for CT scan. And you could have local guys read it real time, faster turnaround, so that when you go to the urgent care, they could diagnose you right away because somebody got to your CT right there.
So I think the question, the CT machine belongs to Dr. Tyson?
Yeah. Yeah, right now, yeah.
It belongs to Tyson.
Yeah, the CT machine, he wanted Heffernan to pay for it. And I'm sure if you offer to pay for it, he would take it also. But it would belong to him, because we're only the landlords of the actual building, not the materials inside.
Okay, but you said you gave them 450,000
Yes.
for the CT machine?
It was for startup costs, training of staff, the first 2 weeks, getting some equipment, and for the down payment of the CT scanner.
Okay.
Yeah. Now,
If
what
we
they
do
have
that-
done, it still needs to be rebuilt, because so what happened was there's been about 18 months or 2 years from that, we're gonna go live to where all delays happen, right? So we went from a 4 to 5 month turnaround time to have that thing done, so it's over 2 years.
Oh, 2 years. Mhm.
So what he claims is that he trained the staff and that money was spent because he's been having to pay for it this whole time. But the people that were hired by him were there literally every week, and they knew that building wasn't gonna get done. So it's just a matter of perception, I guess.
You know, going back to this, I mean, we can cross that bridge when we get to it, but I understand we own the building, he owns the business and everything inside, but maybe a potential, if we were to move forward with the CT, is we just license it to him or some of that, in that regard, to where, if it's our investment.
During a conversation with him, just so you know, and I don't wanna get too much into the weeds, but during a conversation with him, he would be open to just somebody, I think, an outpatient center of El Centro or Pioneers. He would be willing to that, provided that we take that space and carve it out of that monthly rent.
That
Right,
makes
because that
sense.
space, which makes sense, right, because it's, so this is gonna be ours, and say the pharmacy, the same thing happened with the pharmacy, he doesn't have a pharmacy provider, so we could do that as well. So it could be a win-win.
So essentially, there's routes or avenues for Ivhd to make more than the $99,000 a year off of it, correct?
Yes, and I've reached out to, just to get the ball rolling, I reached out to El Centro, and eventually I'll reach out to Pioneers, but it's just reached out to see if there's any interest in working together on a project, if there is. So Pablo's out on vacation, when he comes back, we're gonna have a meeting,
That would
and
definitely make
depending on
sense
direction,
for us
we'll,
to own it.
yeah, we'll talk to see if, because it's very profitable, and hospitals have always more regulations, so there's it's a good and a bad thing, right?
We can get over all those hurdles very
Yes.
easily. And I think it would make sense for us to own the CT machine and Dr. Tyson.
Yes.
But we can talk about that another
I
time.
was gonna say.
Yeah, I think too, like going back, it would help serve the needs of Calexico. And kind of my understanding is doing a partnership like that was the true goal that Heffernan was trying to do, but,
Yeah,
so.
great point.
Any other comments from the board, questions?
No, I'm looking forward to hearing more in the future, but it sounds like we've got a 3-month delay.
Right.
For the south side, so what happened is, Director Burke and I were just talking about classifications for urgent cares, right? As you know, trauma level 4 is what we had in the valley, level 3, there's not a significant change in reimbursement, but level 2 and level 1 do. In urgent cares, they call it a level 1 versus a level 2, but in reality, there's not like a certification for it. So what we know is that the north side of being operable, that means you could have all your assessment rooms and your triage rooms, etc. The only thing that was going to be in the south building, the one that we're waiting for, was going to be the CT scanner, possibly an HBO chamber, and possibly other observation. There's an area that's about, I want to say the size of 3 hospital rooms that he wanted to do observations on, but it doesn't have oxygen wired to the wall, which means you would have to use portable oxygen, which is very expensive. And you wouldn't believe how much a simple tank that you see at the hospital lasts. It doesn't last a long time. Several years ago, somebody hit the oxygen line at El Centro, the liquid oxygen line by the emergency room. And I could assure you that we called all around, and we have to bring people from LA and up north to help us bring liquid oxygen tanks, because those tanks last no more than 6 hours at 2 liters per minute. We're not even talking to people with 10 or 12 liters per minute. So it's a huge cost. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But that building does not have that oxygen setup. So he would like to do observation there, which I'm sure that, and the reason why it's important for us to understand that when we get there is that if a patient comes into an urgent care and you could de-escalate him so he doesn't have to go to the hospital, that may include, can we observe him here for 6 or 8 hours, right? And that's what, an oxygen monitor and nurse watching him. And obviously, that expense is to go to the hospital, because if we leave the hospital, have to be over 23-hour admissions, etc. So there's a process for it. So in time, that may be something that makes a lot of sense. But right now, We just have to worry about, the north end will be open hopefully once those doors get installed. In the south end, that's just not necessary for the beginning.
Yeah, and it's billable by hours or 30-minute intervals, whichever. So.
And I had a quick question on that. As far as the building is concerned, if the hospital were to do a partnership, where does that bring into play the requirements of a hospital? Because I would assume that a hospital would have to have critical power, so the generator, things like that would have to come into play to have those types of things. So are we talking about if this, were to happen, then there's a lot more improvements that would have to happen with the facility, am I correct?
Yes, but what happened was, say, it's really easy to split this down. You could say north end, it's urgent care, outpatient, the south end. And then that would be the only part that the hospital will get involved in that operation, right?
Yeah, you
And-
just call it an ambulatory.
There you go. Yeah.
It's literally
It's
two
ambulatory.
buildings.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it just has different restrictions and different licenses and permits. And then, it could be a walk-in imaging, it could be anything, but it's just a facility.
And I recommend we put on the agenda for the next board meeting an item called update regarding urgent care facilities so that we can get into some more details, because we are kind of veering a little past administrative coordinator update, and we want to make sure folks are aware of.
Still in the show, Thomas.
So, but we'll definitely have update regarding state of urgent care on the next agenda.
That's my thing.
All right, do you have any other comments from the board? If not, I'm gonna move that we go into closed session at 7:20 PM.
Turn off the video and
With that, we'll go back into open session. Mr. Cho, do we have any reportable actions out of closed session?
There was no reportable action taken during closed session.
And with that, I'll adjourn this regular meeting until the next board meeting will be held on September 12, 2024 at 8:45 PM.
Oh, no, 6 p.m. Oh, no, sorry, you're adjourning at 8.
I'm adjourning at 8:45 PM.
Correct.
That meeting's gonna take a while.